So I want to say a word about old machinery. So this is a radial arm saw. This is actually my grandfather's. It's over 50 years old. All I did was clean it up, dust it off, and put a 60-tooth blade on it. Diablo. These get a bad rap. You just have to be safe with it. They stopped making these. They only make these for Home Depot when they go to cut big pieces for customers. But sadly you can no longer buy these because I think all the accidents. But this is made really well. Pretty pleased with it. I mean, my grandfather took really good care of it. It works like a champ. It's a beast. It's all metal. It's a freaking beast. It rides on these coasters. And then I just reinforced these little coasters here. But yeah, it's a beast. It takes up some real estate. But yeah, it's an awesome piece of equipment. So right now I've got it on the miter for the 45s for the picture frames. And this thing it can do bevel. It's got a really long cross cut. These are really awesome. So a word about used. Habitat for Humanity or Craigslist or any of the used markets. If a contractor owned it, they're going to run it into the ground. Basically, you want to look for on these if the motor's burned out, if the bearings are burned out, if you can get parts for it. If I was in the market looking for a miter saw, I would probably go buy it brand new. Just because the price of the used miter saws, like $150 on up. Well, new, depending on what you get, I would probably get a DeWalt, nice DeWalt, maybe for like $300. That way, you don't. I mean, that way it's brand new. But I lucked out because this was an inheritance. It's my grandfather's and my dad, and then grandfather passed away, my dad passed away, so I've got it. I'm taking good care of it. They took good care of it. It's a great piece of equipment. But if you were trying to buy these used, these are probably going for $150, $200 used, and they no longer make parts for these. So you got to be careful on used machinery. Are the bearings out, blown? Is the motor blown? Can you get parts for it? Are the brushes blown? Is it brushless? Do all the safety guards work? Everything work on it? Again, if I was in the market for a miter saw, I'd probably go out, find some sales, get probably a DeWalt miter saw. $300 plus, depending on the sales. But I would kind of steer away from used, not unless you know who owned it beforehand, if they took good care of it. But again, contractors are going to run things into the ground. They're going to run things into the ground, and they usually depends on, like if it's a really nice DeWalt commercial duty, which are usually really good, they take a beating. But again, contractors run stuff in the ground. So I'd be a little leery. Depends on who was the previous owner for the miter saw. If they took good care of it, if everything works. Because you don't want safety pieces to be broken off, guards, dust collectors, and all that. So just beware on the used market. I probably wouldn't recommend used power tools because, again, they burn out and people don't take care of stuff. So I hope this helps. If you have one of these miter saws and need some tips, let me know. Again, this thing's a beast. Takes up some real estate, but it does a fine job. And I think these got a bad rap because safety. But wood shop. I learned on a radial arm saw, and if you took wood shop in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you probably learned on a radial arm saw. And you just got to be careful with it when you feed it. I always kind of obviously pull, but kind of keep a tight pressure, because if it kicks, it'll kick and you want to, if it kicks, it have enough instincts to push it back. As I was cutting through that pine's real easy, real soft, but the harder woods, walnut, hickory, when this gets going, if you don't have a firm grasp on it, because obviously here's your trigger, two buttons, and then you pull it back like this, and basically you're pulling, but not super fast, because this thing can get out from underneath you. You don't want to have this thing freewheel. You want to put some tension on it. You let it do its cut. Let it do its cut, but it's going to want to walk forward. So you just barely nudge it along, but you don't have to do it much because it's going to walk forward on you. So your instincts are going to want to push it back because this thing can kick out, and it can go the length of that, but if you're not careful, you could get hurt. So as you're pushing it, pulling it through your material, push a little bit, but have some force to push it back. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Don't just don't just pull it like this. You don't want to freewheel these things because it will get from underneath you. So you want to keep some pressure as you're pulling. It'll walk. It'll do its thing. It'll cut. It'll start, because as you see the blade rotation there, it'll start wheeling. So you want to be on the ready to push back. Keep that tension pushing back. I don't know if that makes sense. As you're pulling along, you're still putting a little tension on pushing it back. But other than that, I've used this. I've learned on it. I know these get a bad rap. But if you're able to pick up a nice one that's been taken care of, I'd recommend it. But if you don't know who owned it, you don't know the history on it, I would kind of steer away from these. So I hope that helps. Oh, two on these. Actually, this particular model is the lock. So I unlocked it. Between cuts or whatever, I always try to lock this. I always try to lock it. Obviously for storage, but between cuts, again, that's the safety. You want to keep that locked, and then do your cut, unlock it, and then lock it, depending on how many cuts you have to do. But it's always a good idea after this is seated home to lock it. And these two, besides the electrical going out, these cords could go out too. The connection and stuff, so you got to be careful if you buy one used. Make sure all the connections, because there's a lot of mechanics going on here. You got your rail, your cords, your motors, and everything. There's a lot more going on than just like a regular miter saw, because this pulls out. So in this particular model, this is a really been taken care of. But I just want to make a note: after you return it home, lock it, and obviously unplug it if you're not going to use it. So, but yeah, this is dandy. They no longer make these. This is good quality. Again, you don't maybe on the commercial duty, but I think only Home Depot. There's a company, I think in Iowa or Kentucky somewhere, that makes these specifically for Home Depot for customers if you need a rip or a crosscut 4-foot sheets. Home Depot, but other than that, these are dinosaurs. They no longer make them for the consumer market.